everybody. Welcome to the media show on the Pod TV network. My name is Nick Pellavita. I'll be your moderator for today's show. In today's show on media, we have a very special guest, a gentleman by the name of Bob Ross, and he's going to explain a little bit about some of his theories relating to cancer. His background, of course, is in physics, of all the wonderful places, and in the heart, what I call the hard science. It is something that's a unique pleasure here on this network. So without further ado, if we can find him in cyberspace, which we did find him earlier this week, none other than Bob Ross. So Bob, the floor is going to be yours to tell us a little about who you are, where you're from, what you do. Since you're new on the Pod TV network, this is your maiden voyage, they would say. So we're going to turn the floor over to you.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invitation. First off, I love my name, Bob Ross, like the famous painter. Little do my parents know they're going to give me a famous name and a good one. So I was very blessed to be raised in a wonderful family, a loving family. My mom was a professional musician. My dad, interestingly enough, was a mortician. His dad was a mortician, and it was a family business. I was supposed to be an undertaker. I know. In fact, when I was 16, I could finally drive, and I was so excited because I would go on calls with my dad all the time. And so I got to do my first solo pickup. And I got to the hospital. It's like 1:30 in the morning and checked in. Oh, the patient's still in the room. Oh, good. Do I have to go to the morgue? So I go to the 4th floor, check in. Oh, yeah, he's still in 423A. So I go in and he's on the bed and his wife's at the foot of the bed and she's, crying. And so I push our ambulance gurney in and I introduce myself. I'm Bob Ross with Ross Hollywood Chapel. I'm so sorry for your loss. So I put my arms under the gentleman and get him on the gurney, and he goes, "Oh!" And her head pops up. She says, "Who'd you say you were with?" Ross Hollywood Chapel. The mortuary? Yes. He's not dead. The guy in that bed was dead. They took him out 5 minutes ago. So at that point, I thought, well, maybe this isn't the right career for me. And my grandfather was a famous research chemist, always loved the sciences. And so I did get a degree in physics, and I had a specialty in nuclear physics. And when I was there, I found out about the field of medical physics, which the applications of physics in medicine. The biggest one is in terms of cancer therapy, designing cancer treatment cancer treatment for patients. I actually got accepted into Harvard and turned them down because I know that's what my mom said. What? Because I found that after the doctorate, they wanted you to do research. And it's very important. We need that kind of research. But I'm a people person. I wanted to treat people with cancer. So I went to a different medical school program. And when I was there, I was a part of a research team that helped make probably one of the biggest breakthroughs ever in cancer therapy. It's called the hyperthermia effect, hyper. So what we discovered, if you increase the temperature of cancer cells, it made them weak, which means it was easier to take care of. And so just heat up the body before a treatment, sauna. Nowadays, of course, we have infrared, but this is back in the 80s. So we have infrared, a lot of ways to do that. And very exciting because that meant less chemo, less radiation, less side effects from that. And unfortunately, it's pretty much just suppressed and not allowed, shall we say. But since the word got out that we had made this discovery, if you go anywhere in the world where medicine isn't for profit, like Germany, East Asia, Mexico, the first thing they do in cancer clinics is heat up your body. So obviously I was so disheartened because I got into medicine to help people. And I mean, even in medical journals, I found articles about things in nature that would cut off blood flow to tumors. It's amazing. So I go to my professor and say, "Hey, when are we going to start using that?" And they will never. I go, "But it's from nature. There are no side effects." Well, that's why we're not going to use it, because it's from nature. You can't patent nature. So there was a resistance to use something that, that couldn't be part of the, I hate to call it a profit model, but and every organization, every university, every medical hospital has to have a profit to stay in business, and I'm not opposed to that, of course, at all. So I actually spent a total of 11 years in school, and I finished my internship, and I walked away from the field of traditional cancer therapy. And at that point, I actually went into emergency medicine because we're the best in the world on that. That's phenomenal, legitimate. So I started volunteering with a fire department on their EMS medical reserve. I also, grew up playing trumpet and singing and doing stand-up comedy, and those doors opened up. So I started doing that full time, which was wonderful. And as time progressed, in fact, well, I'll just back up one quick spot. When I was still in the medical school program, later on, I actually was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And fortunately, I'm doing well, thank you. But something I noticed was that they never looked at the cause. It was all about, okay, this is what you have, this is what we're going to treat you with. But we got to look at the cause. And probably a great example of that is, let's say that you moved into a new apartment, and unbeknownst to you, there was a radioactive cobalt underneath the floor in your bedroom. So now you're being exposed to that radiation and you get cancer as a result. So you get treatment, you're now free of cancer, but you go back home to be re-exposed to that cobalt, radioactive cobalt. What's going to happen? You're going to get it again. So we have to get to the cause, to the source of that. Does that make sense? So, so during the time when I was, with the fire department, I'm still active, by the way. Have volunteered my services for all 36 years. Love it. I had a real passion for people, even with emotional problems, post-traumatic stress disorder, addictions, phobias. And I had a real gift for that. And in fact, when I was working with cancer patients, I noticed that a high percentage of, like probably the majority of cancer patients, actually had unresolved emotional trauma. Now, especially like bitterness and forgiveness, those are kind of the worst because it literally affects your immune system. Well, if that's the case and that's not resolved, then even if you deal with the cancer, if the what's making your immune system weak isn't resolved, then we're just in this vicious cycle. So I had my own stuff. I had from early childhood that I was dealing with. And so I really dug deep and I discovered a lot of great, wonderful therapies. The best that I found is actually EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. So Gary Craig was an engineer. He perfected this. And engineers are great because they're very methodical. And really, basically, our whole body works on electricity. Everything works on electricity. Chemistry is electricity. Water is H2O because oxygen has a double electrical charge. Hydrogen has a single, so it takes two to balance it out. Everything's electrical. Well, it turns out when there's any kind of emotional trauma, it results in an electrical disturbance in your nervous system. So it's almost like an electrical tumor. They call it an electrical perturbation. And it doesn't show up in any scans. A lot of people aren't even aware of this yet. But as long as that's there, you're going to get triggered. And that's why, like post-traumatic stress disorder, why do they get triggered? Because something happens and that electrical disturbance gets triggered, and then they have the flashbacks. So with EFT, there are very specific spots where a nerve comes to the surface of the skin. Very specific spots. And if you tap on the end of a nerve, it sends an electrical signal down the nerve. Just like when a doctor, taps on your nerve, he's checking your nerve function. On your knee, he's checking your nerve function. Okay? Well, it turns out your brain, your mind knows where in your nervous system that electrical perturbation is. And as you focus on, let's say you're in a bad car crash, focus on the car crash, the sights, the sounds, right? All that, these very specific spots. Your brain is sending electrical signals being generated to literally dissolve the electrical perturbation. So a good example with a phobia. Almost all phobias result from something that happened in early childhood. Okay? Well, when you do that and it resolves the perturbation, the phobia goes away. I had someone with a 56-year phobia, and in 1 hour session, it went away. It hasn't come back. It's amazing. So then it started to hit, well, why don't we use this on patients who have cancer? Especially since a lot of times they have unresolved emotional trauma. That needs to be a really vital part. And now it's becoming more common to to incorporate, family and the spiritual and emotional, all that into treatment, which is wonderful. So, and with the EFT, it works on physical issues as well. I mean, I stopped an asthma attack on an Olympic athlete when the inhaler didn't work. Someone with severe menstrual cramps on the ground, writhing in pain. In 6 minutes, it was gone. I mean, it's just phenomenal what this can do. And I also discovered that the EFT would actually often reveal what the source was. So here's a classic example. A gentleman who had severe abdominal pain would come and go. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. MRIs were fine. CAT scans were fine, ultrasound. And so when we're tapping, I just, will tell someone I'm working with, hey, let me know if a memory comes back. And we're tapping away just on what's present, which is the pain, what it feels like. Does it move, right? Describe it. And all of a sudden it goes, oh, I go, oh. I said to myself, we got it. I said, what's going on? Oh, this has nothing to do with this. I said, that's okay, but what's going on? So I just had a memory from, when I was in the war, and my platoon was out on patrol, and a bomb went off, and my best friend was to my right, and he took the majority of the blast. And we didn't have a medic in our platoon, and he just pleaded with me not to let him die, and he died in my arms. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Out of curiosity, where was your friend injured? Oh, right here. And he points to exactly where he was having that severe pain. That's why they couldn't find anything medically wrong with him, because it was part of that trauma. Well, that's the glorious thing, because they were treating, they were giving pain medications, all those things, but that's never going to work if the cause isn't. So, and I'll get intuitive hits myself. I invented a technique that takes away headaches in about 30 seconds. And a woman sent me an email. Hey, does this work for migraines? I said, yeah, but you really have to start as soon as it starts to come on. Once a migraine gets in, it's like a claw. And EFT actually works pretty good for migraines. So I said, well, why do you have migraines? She said, they're not sure. Really? So she was up in Seattle. I just sent her an email with the spots we were going to work on. And again, we just started working on what was present: the nausea, the light sensitivity, the pain of the migraine. And suddenly, and I'll often get intuitive hits. And I literally heard in my little brain, 14. So, Mary, what happened when you were 14? And she just started to bawl. I said, I'm sorry, I made you cry. Well, what happened? Well, when I was 14, my mom got remarried, and my stepdad started sexually abusing me. Oh, Mary, I'm so sorry. So, Mary, out of curiosity, when did your migraines start? When I was 14. Oh, and how did they play into the abuse? Oh, that's what you wait for. That aha moment. She said, the only time he wouldn't abuse me is when I had a migraine. Mary, that's why they can't find anything wrong with you. There's nothing physically wrong with you. You were giving yourselves migraines to protect you. That's one of the biggest roles of your mind, is to protect you, right? And I said, he's even still alive. No, he's dead. But you still get migraines? Yes. Mary, I bet you get migraines when you don't feel safe. I'd never put that together, she said. So obviously we stopped tapping on the migraine and went to that trauma. And once we resolved that emotional trauma, then the migraines disappeared and never came back.
Yeah, well, with that, we're going to bring in some of our panelists. One person you may be familiar with who has, since you're a smart guy, Bob, one of the smartest people in the planet right now, has an IQ over 190, and that is the famous Rick Rosner, has joined us from California.
I used to. I don't know. That was 10 years ago.
I understand it. I used to be a chess master, Rick, but I don't play anymore. So,
Okay. So,
and then we have our producer in Durham, North Carolina. We'll bring in Mark Lee, and we're discussing something pretty interesting, which deals with hyperthermia. And I'm familiar with it because I actually had one of my clients. Now, this goes back maybe 35 years, investing a lot of his money in Minneapolis, Minnesota, actually, was the Lord, and in Minneapolis, into hyperthermia. as a potential treatment for cancer. Today, from what I understand, it's 1 out of every 3 people believe alternate therapies are out there for cancer, and that there's a big medical business where people leave the United States to go get medical treatment, medical vacations, I guess they call them.
Yeah, that is true.
What are your thoughts, Rick?
So, I mean, I had a little 1 centimeter tumor removed by hypothermia. They injected liquid nitrogen into it and froze it to death. You can also do the opposite. You can cook tumors. You can hit them with heat and so I don't know about heating up your whole body. I mean, the idea with chemo is that you inject stuff that's poisonous into yourself, but it's more poisonous for cancer cells because cancer cells are sick cells than for your healthy cells. So you get sick, but it kills the cancer cells. So yeah, there are various ways to try to do that. Ideally, you don't have to make your whole body sick if you can come up with a treatment that kills just the cancer cells.
Yeah. Mark.
Yeah, I had a quick question. It was actually coming back to Bob's early career and all along those lines, and I definitely want to get back into our thoughts around his medical background and the amazing treatment that he has come up with and been working with and everything like that. But I have been fortunate or unfortunate enough to have several friends, including one that passed away not that long ago, and I've actually taken over his job as the historian at a cultural arts center that I'm part of, and all along those lines. So I've known quite a few people that were morticians and involved in that field and everything, and even know some women in that field that are now out there as well. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that, because unfortunately, as a good friend of mine puts it, we all know our birthdays. None of us know our end date, and we probably wouldn't want to know our end date and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, what was it like to work as a kid as a mortician, and how much did that influence your choice of careers and everything like that? Because like I said, I've known a few morticians in my life, and I know that sometimes people can even have fear of morticians and even have like a morbid fear. I know some people that have told me that when they get the handshake from a mortician, they oftentimes feel that it's a little bit cold and a little bit clammy. Along those lines, it's one of those stereotypes, but it's not always the case.
Well, when my dad, he had a great sense of humor. When he would shake somebody's hand, he'd, instead of shaking it like this, he would shake like this. Oh, I'm just checking. So he'd actually check their pulse when in. So one of the advantages of growing up around a mortuary was that death was part of life. So even as a young boy, I understood that death was a part of life, and some people lived out long years. Some people died early. There were accidents that happened. And one of the things I loved about my father and grandfather is their mortuary, the Ross Hollywood Chapel in Portland, Oregon, was known as the most ethical mortuary in the country, probably in the country, certainly in the Northwest. And they would literally talk people out of expensive caskets if they knew they couldn't afford it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
really good.
I love that. Just love that. And
Well,
go
sorry.
ahead, Mike.
One of the things that I found interesting with Skippy, that's the person I was referring to, that was the mortician that passed away years ago or something like that. It might have been a longer time than trying to remember when he exactly passed. But one of the things that he proposed doing, and I don't think it ever happened, even though the his mortuary, his kind of like funeral home still exists, and to this day his wife is running it, and as well as some of his offsprings and everything like that, was this notion of having an event center at a funeral home. And I don't know that ever really sat well with me or sat well with others as well. So I was just wondering, were there any unusual things that you saw even in that field? Because I do remember that was one of the things he proposed, was having like this notion of an event center, so you could literally have your bar mitzvah, and he was an African American, but you could have a bar mitzvah, or you can have something else in that center, and then of course you would have the funeral and everything. And I'm going like, I don't know if I want to have a baby shower at the same place that I'm having my funeral, but everything like that.
Okay, Mark, I got to go in for you. So our chapel was so beautiful. It was so gorgeous that people actually got married there.
Wow.
That's why they called it Ross Hollywood Chapel, not just Ross Hollywood, mortuary. But, and people do the strangest things. So my dad was given a cassette tape, and from the wife of the man who died. He said, my husband recorded this. He won't let us listen to it, but he wants it into his casket. And when they walk by the casket in the open casket section, he wants you just push play, and these are my husband's words, right? So my dad did.
Why didn't you get into that business? That's a good business because you always have clients. I mean, your clients will never go away because there's always going to be more people coming.
Well, that's true. Well, and I'll answer that in a second, but real quick. So Dad pushed play, and so the recording was, "Hey, you're looking good, man. You're looking better than I am. Hey, thanks for coming out." It was crazy making. Well, ever since I was 6 years old, Nick, to answer your question, ever since I was 6 years old, I had a passion to help people. I had a siren on my bicycle. I'd ride around the neighborhood, bandaging people up, even if they didn't need it. And I never lost it. When I was in Boy Scouts, I took every first aid merit badge there was. And it was kind of funny because when I went into emergency medicine and I'm saving lives, my dad said, "Son, you're going to the dark side."
So that would be the dark side of everything. I do want to come back to the art, and then we'll come back to the serious medicine that you've been part of and everything like that. Because you mentioned being related or having the same name as a famous artist. And as Nick notices, when I have guests of my own or even guests on these shows and everything, I observe what's behind people and everything. So I did notice that behind you is a piece of artwork. So I was wondering whether it was a Bob Ross original or whether it was another artist, and how much is art important to you? Because I'm a big fan of art because my dad is an artist and I have other artists in my life as well. But I did happen to notice the painting behind you. I'm going like, I wonder if that's a Bob Ross.
So, Bob Ross is famous for landscapes and happy trees. And so people meet me and they go, "Oh, can you paint me a happy tree?" I said, "I'd be happy to paint you a happy tree. But the way I paint, it'll look more like a sad, depressed tree, not a happy one." But I love art. I love music. Of course, it's all interconnected. So I'm very, very blessed. And I'm glad I have a good name.
So Bob, are you in Portland, Oregon area then?
So I'm in Los Angeles now.
Oh, Los Angeles. Okay, that's where Rick is. He's in LA.
Oh, nice.
I'm actually in Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yeah, Barcelona, which has a very interesting statistic, is that in Spain, the average life expectancy is around 84.7 years. In the United States, it's around 77 years.
Yes.
So why is it that in Europe, they like in Spain, purportedly the U.S. health system is the best in the world, but how come that here we live longer than we do in the United States?
So what I realized early on was the key to healing is help the body heal. Mm-hmm. Our body is a self-healing miracle. Think about if you cut yourself. The only thing we have to do to help the body is maybe apply some direct pressure, but it does everything else. It seals up the wound, it does clotting, all that stuff. You get a cold, you get the flu. You don't have to take any over-the-counter medication for your body to heal. Those are mainly just for treating symptoms. Your body is naturally designed to heal. And so that's the key. And as we talked about, early with chemo and radiation is, the side effects. Like with radiation, the first thing the radiation hits gets the highest dose of radiation. So if the tumor is deep inside, all the good, healthy tissue between the skin and that organ get blasted with radiation, right? So, and again, it can affect the immune system, suppress the immune system, and so forth. And I have to be very clear, I'm not giving medical advice. Always seek the consultation of a qualified medical professional when you're dealing with something like this. But in other areas, they look first off preventative medicine, keep your immune system healthy. We have really bad diet here in the US, right? And why do we eat? Well, we eat because of the nutrients, the enzymes, the proteins, all those things to help our body function. So if we're just eating processed foods, our body doesn't really need processed foods to function. It can convert things and help, but so that's one of the keys. Yes.
Just really quickly along those same lines, because I do research on our guests and everything along those lines. And I actually had somebody went through something similar to what you went through, and they also were successful. And I can't think of the young lady's name and everything, but she has recovered after having been diagnosed and basically being told that she had very little time to live from a brain tumor. And I know that you went through that as well and everything. And you even said that there were massive mistakes that you made when you were diagnosed with this brain tumor. So what is that like, and what do you think the mistakes that people make in general? Because I know I've had a friend who unfortunately passed that actually had a aneurysm, a brain aneurysm, but she lived many years after that brain aneurysm. Ironically, it was at a Sweet Honey and the Rock concert here in Durham, North Carolina, when she had her first attack. And like I said, she eventually passed away, but she lived for many years after that first attack and everything. But I was just wondering, what was your thoughts around being one diagnosed, because a lot of times people are thinking that that's pretty much the beginning of the end. And like I said earlier, none of us know our end date, but we hope to live as long as possible. So what was one of those massive mistakes or multiple massive mistakes that you felt you made?
Well, again, the first thing I noticed that concerned me, that they never looked at the cause. Mm-hmm. And then when I was there in the medical school program, studying the physiology and biology of cancer cells and what they need to survive. And one of the things that cancer cells need to survive is sugar, especially refined processed sugar. Right? Unbelievable, because of the high metabolism, unbelievable appetite for that sugar. And yet, when people were coming to the hospital for treatment for cancer, they were given Coke, milkshakes, ice cream. And that never made sense to me, right? Rick, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I would recommend, I don't know if it's a mistake, but one thing you should do is once you get into your 50s is take a look inside your gut, like get an MRI or an ultrasound, not a CT scan, because that's a ton of radiation, but an MRI I'm getting one tonight because they're looking inside my gut. I get it every 6 months because I had a tumor. If it's ideally you have insurance that pays for it, but even if it doesn't, they took a look inside me in my late 50s for no good reason. I just thought, we have the technology. They found stuff, because if you wait until stuff causes symptoms, you're screwed.
Yeah, you're behind the eight ball, as they
talked
say.
About sugar. There's a great diabetes drug that you can take even if you don't have diabetes, which is metformin. 60 million Americans take it. It makes you use your body's own insulin more efficiently, so it fights sugar. So another thing you can do is just pay attention to, stuff is happening so fast. The amount of new medical information doubles every year. So you can see what's come out on the market. Like you talked about brain tumors. Jimmy Carter had terminal brain cancer at like age 91. Didn't die. Died at 100 because they gave him Keytruda, which helps your immune system fight cancer. It fought off this supposedly terminal cancer. And that was a new use of this drug.
Yep. And Rick, that's a good point, because the real success is going to come when we help the immune system do what it's designed to do.
Right. But I get bummed. My wife, every time she gets a vaccination, she gets pretty sick. She gets like she has flu. And I'm like, I don't get that. I'm like, well, I'm jealous of my wife because her symptoms show that her immune system is really good. It reacts to the vaccine and by making her a little sick. So
Hey, Bob, one of the things I've always been curious about, and I've never quite understood it, maybe you can help me understand it, because I know one of the things that you research is the whole notion of addiction. And there's all kinds of addictions, everything from sex addiction to drug addiction to even addictions around a number of other things as well and everything. But one of the things that is always fascinating me is it seems that a lot of times people that are addicted, because the cultural center that I work at used to be one of the home offices for the NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous. But I would notice that sometimes the Narcotics Anonymous people would give up on whatever their narcotics of choice was, but then they'd become addicted to sweets or addicted to cigarettes. So it sounds like a lot of times our addictive personality wind up just trading one addiction for another without necessarily curing the addiction. Am I wrong in thinking that, or is that a commonality?
No, that's true, because we're trying to cover up the pain, right? If there's emotional trauma, we're just trying to cover up the pain, whatever it takes. And I worked with someone who was addicted to crystal meth. And the first session, I just said, you can tell me anything, and there's no judgment, there's no condemnation. Right. So just tell me about your childhood. What? Oh no, I'm in problem now. Yeah, just tell me about your childhood. So he told me about his childhood. I said, my friend, you're perfectly normal. If I had gone through that, I would be doing crystal meth too. You're just trying to cover the pain And until that pain is resolved, that trauma is resolved, then, you know, you're going to find something to try and cover up that pain. And that's what I love about the concept of EFT. They also call it tapping, since we're, you know, tapping on that. And again, I studied for 6 years with the guy who developed it, traveled all over the country. And the other big thing I wanted to bring up was my fascination when I was in the medical school program for the placebo effect. Right? So during drug trials, some people get the real drug, some people get a sugar pill. And a percentage of people that get the sugar pill will get cured as though they took the real drug. In fact, if they're told about side effects, they'll have the side effects, but they weren't given anything.
Yeah.
Now, what that told me was, wait a minute, that means the mind has that ability.
Are some addictions more acceptable than others and everything? Because I'm thinking that some people may not be as worried about a sex addiction because it is part of the everyday life and everything, whereas drug addiction, particularly some of the heavy ones, and I've had family members that have been involved in that mess space as well and everything, so I know what that mess space looks like and everything. But I do know that certain addictions might be more acceptable to society than others, or is there like a hierarchy of addictions?
Well, they're all going to have a negative effect, and some have more severe effects than others. And I want people to live a full and rich life and get all that stuff they can out of the way.
Let's talk about food addiction for a second. 74% of American adults are obese or overweight. And you can fight it with discipline, and you can fight it with Ozempic. And so we're moving into, we understand the body and the mind better and better and our understanding is going to grow just wildly as AI starts generating medical results. So, you know, it's great if you can work with somebody's psychology, their mentality to fix addictions, but it's also great if you can just hit people with a blunt instrument like Ozempic, that it doesn't have that many it doesn't have bad side effects. It's been used for 10 years. Only recently have people been using it just for straight up weight loss. And so we're going to have a bunch more tools, both internal, psychological, and freaking just hit the symptoms.
Yeah, and again, I'm not giving medical advice, but especially ER
I'm
physicians.
a disclaimer below there, Bob.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Yeah, a lot of physicians that I've talked to are seeing a lot of side effect problems from Ozempic.
What are people seeing?
Well, I won't go into it because that's
all right, but I assume that it gives people intestinal distress. I would guess that you see a lot of pooping.
Well, and much more severe. So, and even on the fire department, again, the patients said these are the most bizarre patients, and what they were experiencing was actually the side effects. So that's why I am so keen on helping the body heal, so you don't need some other thing, right? I'm all in favor of prescription drugs for emergencies because they're phenomenal, but we want the body to actually heal, right? And that's why.
But the body has limits. I look at this panel, and all four of us here show signs of aging. Nobody would mistake any of us here for a 25-year-old. And so one of the things I'm looking forward to, I hope fast enough to help me and my wife, is like fixes for aging. You know,
well, we're not exactly spring chickens and everything like that, but I do have to ask about a spring chicken because Bob, as I was doing some of the research and looking at your website, there was a show that was very popular because this is the media show on TV. I used to be a big fan of it, and apparently you were a medic for this show. So I want to know what it was like being a medic for the Amazing Race and everything, because I see that you were a medic for Amazing Race, the American Ninja Warrior, Star Wars, and SEAL Team, which is a great drama and everything along those lines. But I'm just thinking about the Amazing Race, and yes, I'll admit it, I used to be one of those folks that would watch the Amazing Race and see these people trying to run and do all kinds of exercises and endurance events throughout the world. And some of those events, I'm going like, yeah, that looks fun, but it also looks very dangerous. So I would see why they might need a medic on those trips and everything. But I was just wondering, what was it like to be a medic as you were going to these exotic environments?
Yes. Well, since I volunteered my services to the fire department, I had to earn income somewhere and some way. So one of the things I started doing is working as a motion picture set medic. So I'll be on the sets of movies, television shows, commercials, music videos for when stunts go wrong, medical emergencies happen, people get electrocuted. And like you say, I've gotten to work on all these wonderful shows. American Ninja Warrior did that, I think, for 5 seasons. I was so busy on that show. Unbelievable. Got to work on 2 of the Star Wars. Great thing about The Amazing Race, it was a fun reality show, right? The competition, all that. But unfortunately, I didn't get to travel with them. So I did their LA base. Okay. And then because I offered, hey, I'll go with you. And they said, oh, it's less expensive to hire as we go. Yeah, great opportunities. And they would often bring me in because of my fire department experience for high risk stunts. And part of my job is to stop a stunt if it's not going to go well and, to try and protect the stuntmen. But yeah, a lot of wonderful experiences. Oh,
it sounds like you have to share with someone at some point or another. But I also saw that you got a congressional award for literally bringing a man back to the dead. We were talking about Agent Rick, was it, or anything like that. So I'm going like, what is it like, and how did you manage to bring a man back from the dead, and how did you get a U.S. congressional medal for this? Because apparently you got a congressional award for this.
Yes. So as I mentioned, I have a good sense of intuition. Mm-hmm. And so I'll get into it if it fits. So even every day, I'll often get a hit to be someplace at a certain time to save somebody who may have died otherwise. Happens all the time. And so I'm at an event at the Rose Bowl, and my assignment is the south end of the bowl. And I hear, go to the north end of the bowl. Well, that doesn't make sense because I'm supposed to be at the south. Ooh. So if it doesn't make sense, it's often a really good hit. And I believe it's the big guy giving me instructions, because how would I know this otherwise? So I tell my partner, we got to go north end of the bowl. So we drive up, get to about tunnel 7, and I could just feel it. Ooh, stop here. Within 20 seconds and within 20 feet of where we stopped, a guy dropped to the ground right in front of us. I turn to my partner and I go, well, I guess that's why we're here. Woohoo! He's a young guy. He was buffed. He was great shape. He was conscious and breathing. And about a minute in working on him, he died right in my arms. Well, not on my watch. So started CPR on him, got out the defibrillator, analyzed his heart rhythm. He was in ventricular fibrillation, VFib, where the heart is just quivering like a bowl of Jello. So it's not pumping anything. And we shocked him and actually converted it on the first shock. Now, normally, if someone, once they're converted, they're unconscious for hours. 3 minutes later, not only is he awake, but he's getting up off the ground. Even the cops are backing up, go, oh, I've never seen this before. It's like Lazarus. I go, yeah, it's kind of like Lazarus. So what we discovered, and I'll tell you why he had what he had, was that when people die and we bring them back, some people remember it, some people don't. Yeah. Those that do say the exact same thing, regardless of their religious upbringing, doesn't matter if they're atheist. They say, Bob, when I died, my spirit left my body. I floated up about seating level, and I'm looking down at my body, and they'll start pointing to people. You're the guy who's doing chest compression. You were wailing on my chest. Did you have to push that hard? I guess so, because people are saying you're doing a good job. And you're the guy that shocked me with those paddles. Okay? So that because of that, when I'm doing CPR, I'm looking up. And again, I didn't know who this guy was. Hey, buddy, I was sent to be here. Probably something you're going to do great with your life. You got to fight to come back. You got to fight to come back. If I have a person old enough to be a grandparent, guess who I talk about? Mm-hmm. Their grandkids. That's usually the driving force in their life. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out this guy was in perfect health. He had no heart disease. He had no clogged arteries. It turns out he had a mechanical defect with his heart he didn't even know he had. And the cardiologist said if it stops like it did, it's a 95% death rate. Wow. She said the only reason you're alive is somebody witnessed your heart stopping, instantly started CPR, and shocked you within about a minute.
Yeah, right.
I want to go back to The Amazing Race for a second, because it's one of the big gripes I have with competition shows. Amazing Race starts with 11 couples. 9 of them They all compete. They get amazing adventures, which is great. 9 of them leave with nothing. The runner-up, they split 25 grand. The winner, they split $1 million. And it's like, they put people through. Now, that's a fun ordeal. But there's another show, it used to be on ABC, called Wipeout, started with 24 people.
Yes.
You wouldn't associate yourself with that show. That show is where people get smacked in, they fly through the air, they fall into the water.
Brutal.
24 people, one person leaves with 50 grand, which is just a pittance compared to what the risk they're put through. 23 people leave with nothing except possibly spinal injuries. I hate how cheap the compensation for quiz show, game show contestants.
By the way, Bob, you share something with the other gentleman that is here with us now and everything, because you are you have a background in entertainment as well, because you are a singer, a professional trumpet player. But the other gentleman that is there with us, Jacoby, has also done work as a stand-up comedian, because he's an improv comedian, and
Nice.
he's done some work as a voiceover artist, because he is the voice of the game activities within the Durham Bulls. So not the play-by-play, but like the contests that go on if you were in minor league baseball. So he does that kind of work as a announcer for those events and everything. So just tell us a little bit about what it's like to blend your entertainment dreams and your creative dreams with your dreams of this deep science background.
So one of my favorite phrases and terms is redemption.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a young boy, my mom had severe back problems and all sorts of things. So she'd be bedridden for sometimes a week at a time. And I'd be like 8, 9 years old. And my self-appointed job when I got home was to make her feel better. So I'd go into the bedroom and stand at the foot of the bed, and I'd play my trumpet, and I'd sing, and I'd do funny stuff, tell her jokes. And then when I was like 15, I noticed that I could mimic voices and accents, and well, sure, he be going in a prison with it, good to be having you here. Not hide as a leprechaun. I can't go talking like that all my life, right? And that would make her feel better, and then that just kind of opened up. So when that became a career, my favorite thing to do, because sometimes I'd be hired just as a trumpet player in a horn section or a singer on a studio gig, but my favorite was doing entertainment for like corporate events, shareholder meetings, banquets, because I could do music, comedy, voices, impersonations, like our former governor, Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
This is my impersonation of him trading in the stock market. So he's looking at his computer screen. Yeah, the prices going up, the prices go down. Is the money going out to my account like I was governor of California, and some people in the taxes and things like this and the other things. So, and I was that way as a kid. I played sports. I played trumpet, piano, and guitar. I was into the sciences. And my parents said, that's great. As long as it doesn't affect your schoolwork, you can do that. And that never changed. And even to this day, I'm still, they used to call me having multiple personality disorders, but I call it a Renaissance man.
I like the Renaissance man. Jacoby's a Renaissance man. Jacoby, you got any questions for our esteemed guest, Bob Ross, and everything? Like I said, y'all have some commonalities.
Well, I've been listening in the background the whole time, and the fun part is you guys started talking about the gut, and I'm like, I'm a fat guy. I like to eat, so I've got me some food. I was actually going to start cooking. I found an amazing recipe around sausage balls, which is so good. So yeah, I decided to get all my stuff together and start doing that. But and since we're having a good time and having a good old laugh, the best question that popped in my mind, because Bob, you talked about growing up and keeping people happy with the different accents and everything else. I was just an idiot. I did the Ren Fair, and they asked for us to come up with our own characters, and my character was the village idiot, and I was proud of it. So I'm going to continue that now, because my big question is, how many times a day do you get asked to paint happy little trees?
All the time, and I love it. In fact, I thought, what if my name had been Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yeah,
and I'm on the fire department. Hi, I'm Jeffrey Dahmer, your medic today. Oh, wait for the next crew, man.
So we're back to eating again, it looks like.
Hey, Hey, speaking of the eating and all of those, but you had he had the pleasure of working with the Secret Service, and they provided medical coverage for the head of the Homeland Security. So we know that the Secret Service got a lot of flack because of what happened with the person that was president, is about to be president again, and everything. But you did this for a commencement speech. Did you have concerns about Homeland Security when you were working with this head of the Homeland Security and you were giving him sort of medical coverage, or did you have concerns about the Secret Service? Did they give you some big background check?
Oh, big background check. Absolutely. And it is very, very cool to be the inside because they have perimeters that are set up. There are different layers of the perimeter. And then they have the hot zone. And so obviously I was in the hot zone because if something happened to him, in fact, one of the Secret Service guys says, Bob, if he gets shot, you better save him. Yes, sir. They were very, very good. They had snipers on the rim of the outside theater, amphitheater. And in fact, I called a code because someone violated the inner perimeter. And so they come rushing out and they say, oh, Bob, he's one of us. Mm-hmm. So he looked like he was 14 years old. He had a baseball cap and a backpack, right? Why would you have a backpack come into a commencement, right? But he was undercover. I go, well, that's a very effective undercover. Yes. Oh, and I did want to address something before I forget. So regarding that placebo effect, there's a phenomenal studies. A woman got her PhD on this, and there was a gentleman who had severe multiple personality disorders. And one of his personalities, say James, had full type 1 diabetes. His pancreas did not produce insulin. He was insulin dependent. But another one of his personalities had a fully functioning pancreas.
Wow.
So was there anything wrong with his pancreas? No. So what was literally turning it on and off? His mind. That's the power of belief. And my frustration in medicine is we don't use the placebo effect on purpose. A good example, if you had an infection and the doc gave you an antibiotic, right? If he said this antibiotic is the most powerful, wonderful antibiotic for exactly what you have, it would actually work better, even though it's the same chemical structure.
But I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say the negative of that is the nocebo effect, where we can have given a medication that will literally cure us, and we can negate the effect of that medication.
Wow. Bob, how curious is that? How common is that? Because you mentioned that, and I've had a couple of friends that were in the military, and I know you've had the distinct pleasure of working with some folks in the military as well and everything. But how common is it for folks that have got a bipolar disorder or other disorders to have what you just described, which is that they have the different personalities have different medical issues and everything? So how common is that? Because what you just described, I'm going like, well, the person is bipolar, I can see where they might have, but maybe one personality has a cold and the other personality doesn't have a cold on that particular day and everything. So how common is that?
So it's not bipolar, it's multiple personality disorder.
Okay.
Right. So bipolar, my understanding is just the severe swings, right? So it's having the distinct personalities. They switch into another personality, different tone of voice, usually, you know, how they carry themselves. There's an identity that they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And everything.
And it's not very common.
Can't be that common. Just really quickly, because when Nick introduced Rick, he mentioned Rick's background as a member of the High Q as society and all along those lines, Mensa and all in that space. But you also have got some severe distinction, because I understand you're the first person ever to graduate with distinction in physics with a dissertation in nuclear physics. So has anybody tried to match that?
One of my major.
I'm talking about Bob did that.
Rick, go ahead, Rick.
Oh no. Sorry, I didn't know what you were. Anyway, yeah, I have a degrry in physics, but that doesn't.
But so does Bob, and apparently he did a dissertation. So I want to know if anybody has batched his dissertation.
This isn't a competition, fortunately.
No, this is a competition. I just have a question for Bob. Have you ever used UpToDate and as an EMT to use UpToDate as a research tool to stay up to date with the changes that are taking place in the medical field?
So what I'm really trying to keep focused on is breakthroughs. Like I developed a brain technique that can help you reprogram subconscious beliefs. And I invented that because I found out that I had a severe a fear of success, and I was sabotaging my success. I didn't want to. I wanted to be successful, but because of childhood stuff, right? I had this fear, and I was always fascinated with the brain, and just found a way to do that. And then suddenly I realized, wait a minute, this is years later. After that, I was successful. Wait a minute, with this placebo effect, what if I can modify I call it the hidden secret brain technique. What if I could modify this to actually help release that placebo effect on purpose?
By the way, because I can put that across, I do see your website because that's partially what I've been looking at, but it's the hidden secret to healing.com. So I should actually probably grab that and put that across the panel so other folks can see it as well and everything. You don't know this, but the network here, Pod TV, has a bookstore. So do you have any books out that we need to be aware of as well so that we can put the books on our bookstore and all along those lines? Because it's actually books of authors that have been on various shows of ours here on the network. So Bob, is there any books of yours that we need to grab to put on our Amazon bookstore?
So I am thinking about writing a book. The challenge is I'm coming up with new inventions, things all the time. And so it would need to be like an ebook or something that could be like updated online or whatever. And then I also help people just sometimes strictly with post-traumatic stress disorder and phobias, addictions. And that website is the hidden secret to emotional healing. So there's the hidden secret to healing, and then the hidden secret to emotionalhealing.com.
So you mentioned the side effects to Ozempic. I looked up the side effect rates, and these numbers are not great because it's based on studying only about 500 people. But abdominal pain, 7%, constipation, 5%, diarrhea, 8.5%, nausea, 16%, vomiting, 5%. Most of these symptoms go away within a couple weeks. I assume a lot of it is Ozempic running into your old eating habits. Ozempic changes your eating habits. And I assume once you get everything leveled out, that you're not pooping and barfing.
And we can prescribe it to Jatovi. Oh, wait, there's Jatovi.
So I did think of another question. I had the dogs going crazy, so I had to chase them.
Oh,
off.
yes.
However, we were just talking about the gut and the ingeniousness, but I saw it was a meme, but then I tried to do a little bit of research in it. But since you're here, Bob, you can help me because this is about the butt and the brain and the athleticism. Evidently, there was a study done that said that pooping improved your cognitive abilities and your athleticism. I just read something about that. So, Bob, you're here and we're having a good time. So I figured I might as well keep it happy and ask you.
Well, one thing I know for sure, the lack of pooping will negatively affect. Right.
Okay.
So that's why
that's what killed Elvis. Elvis couldn't poop. He gave himself a heart attack, squeezing so hard trying to poop.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about alternative therapies, Bob, have you heard about, I just saw it on the internet again, cold showers. Okay.
Oh, now
they say if you take a cold shower and you start cooling your body off, it'll actually improve your results and life.
It'll squeeze it out.
So here's the deal.
I hate
So
cold showers, so
I know I hate them too. It's a phenomenal thing to do because if you take it suddenly cold, not just getting cold, but suddenly cold, like jumping in cold water, it is a stimulus to the immune system. It actually cranks up your immune system.
Yeah.
Right. So, and interestingly, Aborigine tribes, right, no medicine coverage. When they get sick, they take their fist and they pound it on their chest. Well, it turns out the thymus gland is there, part of the immune system, and that vibration cranks it up.
So let's talk about diabetes and body temperature. If you're diabetic, you're running hot, and you basically are cooking yourself faster than somebody without diabetes. That's,
Rick, you're mispronouncing it. Wilford Brimley's not around, so it's diabetes. Diabetes.
Okay. Sorry. But the way the way of pooping gives you a heart attack is you have a major blood vessel that comes out of the bottom of your heart. If you're crunched over on the toilet, you can pinch that blood vessel shut. That will give you a heart attack. That's what killed Elvis, they think. And it also killed a character on The Sopranos. There was somebody who died pooping on The Sopranos.
Well, and bearing down when especially if you're constipated, can trigger the vagus nerve in your neck, and that causes your blood pressure to drop, and that's why a lot of people pass out sitting on the pot.
Boy, I just really love these uplifting stories.
Wait
a minute, we have another special guest coming in from Australia. He's always uplifting. His name's Shaquille Latmer. He's a hedge fund manager, but don't let that fool you. And him and Toby are like best friends. So I guess he just couldn't resist showing up.
Well, if you want me to add to the shitty conversation that you're currently having, I will come out and say Happy New Year to everybody. And to Toby, I think I heard you say that your act was being the village idiot. I think it suits you quite well, buddy.
Ooh, cold-blooded.
Oh, by the way, Shaquille, your email doesn't
It's okay. Work. It's okay because evidently, the village idiot always survives in the end.
I hope you guys all had a great festive season. I probably don't have enough time to really talk to you, Bob Ross, but I've just been to your website, and I look forward to exploring what's on there.
Awesome.
Yeah. We'll just have to get Bob back because we're almost at the hour and we have to leave. Usually I wait till Jacoby has a couple more things to say, then I cut him off. It's kind of like a tradition.
Well, Bob, just really quickly, since you mentioned it, we only got 2 minutes to go. Give us a good TV story from doing your TV stuff. Like we did Amazing Race, so maybe give us one from American Ninja Warrior. What was that like? And give us a good story from American Ninja Warrior.
I'll tell you my favorite story, but I won't tell you what show. So it's a live show, primetime, major network. Did I mention it was live?
Yes.
So during one of the shows, the boom camera that gets those great aerial shots was making a quick move over the audience, too low. Guy about 6'2" stood up, bam, clocked him in the head. So I get to the guy's on the ground just, dazed and blood dripping out his head. So I'm trying to stop his bleeding and stabilize him. And I hear my earpiece from the director, Bob Medic, keep your head down. We can see you on camera. We're still live? We haven't cut to commercial. We're still live. Keep your head down. So I'm literally laying on my belly on the ground, head down, trying to help this guy. And about 10 seconds later, I hear, Bob Medic, tell the guy to quit moaning. We can hear him on audio. Tell him to shut up.
Well,
was that Bill O'Reilly yelling out, do it live, do it
We're going
live.
to be quiet now because we have timeshares solutions coming up, and timeshares, basically the timeshare show, how people get screwed by buying timeshares. They'll be going up right now on the Pod TV network. So if you bought a timeshare and you figured out after a while that you've been screwed, pay attention to the next
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. And with that, we'll see you next week on the Media Show. Take care.
Awesome.